because nowadays we talk about sustainability a lot, I think it's also worth to understand how we can link neuroscience with sustainable consumption. So how can neuroscience tools help us to be sustainable consumers? So there are different ways in which we can apply the study of cognitive processes and emotional responses to sustainability. So what we can do is looking at, in general, how people make decisions about products. So what's the difference if you compare green product versus non-green products? Or again, product attributes. We said this is really important and sometimes can really affect how consumers make decisions about products and services. So which aspects of sustainability consumers are most interested in? It's about the logo, for instance, the material, or simply about the brand. And finally, do we have environmental biases? So is it possible to even detect if we have high or low level of excitement, for instance, for environmental processes? So some research out there says yes, that actually neuroscience can help us in developing pro-environmental behaviors. The way in which we can do this is looking at individual and group differences, but also similarities when we assess sustainable issues. Or we can also look at what kind of different attitude and decision-making process could eventually affect how we choose products. And finally, which specific mechanisms are involved in sustainable consumption in the long run? So are we more sensitive to certain issues? Yes, but how can we keep it up in the long run? So how can we make sure that our changes in behavior are kind of permanent, so they will not go back to what we used to do in the past? Now, one nice study which focused on individual differences was done in 2014. So in this case, what researchers did was measure the electrical brain activity of consumers while they were observing different type of products. So in this case, they use EEG, so electroencephalography. Again, this is a tool that allows you to measure the brain activity, but in this case we talk about electrical brain activity. Anyway, so what this researcher did was measure the electrical brain activity of consumers while they observing different type of products. Some were, let's say, had some sustainable properties, something didn't. And before that, they even asked them, okay, how do you feel about sustainability? So are you actually concerned about the environment, and do you take that into account while you are buying products and services? And what they found was extremely interesting because they saw that there was increase in the brain activity of green consumers in response to these sustainable products that they saw. So specifically for levels of delta, and beta waves, so a different way, let's say, output to measure the electrical brain activity. And so this means, they concluded based on this study, that green consumers have different changes in the brain activity compared to non-green consumers when they look at green products. Now this is kind of extraordinary, isn't it? Because we can see that ideological dissimilarities between consumers are actually rooted in how our biology as well, right? So it's about understanding that if we are convicted, like if we are committed to certain ideologies, like in this case, really saving the environment a big concern, so this will reflect also in our brain activity. So, and this tells us that we are basically the same, but also different, right? So, we should investigate this a little bit more to understand, maybe in different scenarios, to see, okay, if this really possible to detect these differences. And another study, actually here, is about nudging. So it's called nudging your consumer towards sustainable consumptions. Here is another example. So these researchers actually use fMRI to study how people will react to different products. So what they showed them here was different type of brands, so Louis Vuitton and H&M, and also they show some products in which there was a green logo and some others in which was not. And they wanted to see if it was a difference in the brain activity when people were looking at the green logo. But before that, they actually tried something extremely interesting. So they look at priming. So message priming. Before showing consumer these products, they actually showed them some videos. In one video, the message was kind of explicit. Okay, we need to save the environment. In the other one, instead, the so-called message priming, so this message was not so direct, but still they tried to create some associations. So they try to play a little bit with consumers in connecting certain type of information and to see if this could affect how their behavior in the long run. So that was the idea, to use this so-called rational reasoning to see if they could change consumer attitude towards sustainable consumption. Basically, so if you expose environmental priming, so if you show consumers messages about environment, can this reduce the disbalance that we have between attitudes, so just feeling bad for the environment, but actually acting on it? And what they found was extremely interesting. So with fMRI, so they see that there is indeed an effect of the green logo. So when consumers were looking at products with the green logo, there was a little bit higher activation in specific brain areas. But what was more interesting is the fact that people who did look at priming messages, actually they had brain areas, activity in the brain areas, they are related to relational reasoning. So what does it mean? That in this case, relational reasoning is about filling a gap that you feel between these different concepts. To give you an example of this, for instance, if you have message priming, if you are a kid and then you are used to consume candies, right? And then it's usually close to a red bench. Every time you see a bench in the long run, so you will start thinking about candies. So, and here's the same thing. So because they were exposed to a message about sustainability, they started to think differently about sustainable issue, and that was visible also in changes in the brain activity. So they put together this information through relational reasoning. And I would like to conclude the class with a small thing that I always say. So remember that marketing is everywhere, even in our brain. So thank you so much. And thank you for your